Hello, everyone. This is your host, Susan Rosen. And my guest today is John Ross, actually, John K. Ross. And I think there were some numbers after that, too, I believe. But anyways, and he is here to talk about a subject that we haven't talked about before, but he and I both agree is just as big a part of your health and wellness as it is picking your doctor or learning about what you ought to eat or exercise. So welcome, John, and I'm very happy to have you here on the program.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. I think this is great. I think what I've got to talk about will tie in very well to
Yeah.
to what y'all do. And just kind of as a little bit of quick background on me, I'm an estate planning and tax attorney. That's
Okay.
kind of my background. But about 20 years ago, we saw that there was a void in the knowledge base, particularly with the people that are approaching retirement and living in retirement, where all of a sudden there's this kind of conflagration. I don't know if I even use that word correctly, where you get wills and trusts and guardianships and powers of attorney and laws related to that. And then those all compete with Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid and veteran benefit programs. And those all compete with real estate issues and tax law. And they all compete with, with all these things that all come together. And what we found was that they had no knowledge, but that they generally had three concerns. And those three concerns were that if at all possible, they didn't want to have to go to a nursing home. That was a big one. Number two, that if at all possible, they didn't want to be a burden on their family members, loved ones. And number three, they didn't want to go broke trying to accomplish the first two goals. And nobody seemed to have the answers to this. They didn't teach it in law school. There was really nothing out there, but we thought, well, you know what? We're going to make ourselves the experts at it. And that's what we did. We started our own firm with a sole focus of doing this. And it was my partner, Lisa Scholmeyer, and I, 2 laptops and a card table. And 20 years later, we're 7 offices across 2 states.
Oh my God.
And
Wow.
we did a live radio show for 7 years on this subject. So yeah, obviously we were right. There was a huge demand for this knowledge out there.
Oh, I totally agree. I totally agree. It's yeah, actually it's kind of scary how much people don't know.
It is. And what I hate to see, we have kind of you can almost break our practice into 2 halves. You have the folks that are planning well in advance, often because they have seen this problem with a loved one. They had a mother with Alzheimer's, or a father with Parkinson's or something like that, and they've been down this road. And so they're saying, okay, how do I fix this for myself? The other people, and they're the crisis planning, they had no idea how big the train was that was coming down the tracks. And then once it smashed into them, it's just been problem after problem, and they're panicking, they're freaking out, they don't know what to do. And there are still a lot of things that can be done, but like with anything else, a little bit of prevention will often go a whole lot better. There's never a situation where it's too late. I get that all the time. Well, it's probably too late for us to do anything. Well, no, that's never the case. But it doesn't mean the solution's easy. It might have been a couple of years back, but now there's still solutions. It just may not be easy.
Yeah. Well, and I think that you probably realized as well that or have a what's the right thing, that when you first start talking to people who have not had any experience with any of this, to say, okay, the first thing you need to do is, just a will or just something simple, just so there's something written down. So when you walk out of here, you don't get hit by a car.
Well, and what's funny is I actually will often joke with people, and I'll say, one of the because one of the most common conversation points when people come to the office is they want to talk about a will. Do I have a will, or do I need to have a will? Can I write my own will? All of these sort of questions, but it's always related about wills. And I'll often say, well, you never see lawyers make a lot of promises. If you watch the ones that are standing on top of 18-wheelers on the TV commercials and promising they're going to get you millions of dollars in that lawsuit. But if you look at the bottom in little bitty fine print, it says, we do not guarantee results, right? But I will make everybody a promise when it comes to the will. And that is, you will never care whether or not you have a will. And if you think about it, you'll figure it out pretty quick, right? You'll be dead before it ever matters to anybody.
That's right.
And yet people's brain has a tendency to jump from their current position to death. And what they forget about is the incapacity in between.
Yes.
And so, for example, what I'll often then start out and I'll say, have you ever tried to call the phone company if your name is not the one on the account? If your husband set up the account and you're trying to call, or, and I'll point out, if I want to upgrade my cell phone, I have to drag my wife to Verizon because the whole cell phone service is in her name.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
And most everybody has experienced that. They've had that situation where they, there's the power's out at the house and they try to call the electric company and they say, oh, well, I'm sorry, we can't talk to you because it's in Bob's name or Jane's name, right?
Right. Yeah.
And while that's inconvenient right now, imagine if your spouse has had a stroke and they're never going to speak again. And now something as trivial as talking to the phone company has become a huge problem. Yeah. And of course, if the phone company is that serious about it, how serious is Medicare? The IRS. Right.
Yes.
The people that manage your pension, right? If one day the direct deposit on that pension check doesn't show up and you need to call and find out, and you don't have the authority to find out why they didn't make the deposit that month, this could be a life and death sort of situation, right? Especially if you're talking about people on a fixed income. And so number one, probably the single most important thing for anybody would be a durable power of attorney.
Right.
Something to say, here's who I want to handle my business if I'm incapacitated. And typically with alternates, right? Maybe a spouse. Most people would, if they're married, they might appoint their spouse first. But often being of similar age, if one of you goes down, the other one may not be in any better shape. So,
or if you go traveling and the airplane goes down, you're probably both going to be on it.
Exactly, right? Yeah, especially in your retirement years, you're traveling together, you're riding around in the car at the same time. So having them one or more backups. The durable power of attorney should be drafted to cover just about everything except for medical decisions. So for that, you would have a medical power of attorney. Same concept, but this would be, you're at the hospital, you're unconscious. The doctor says, if you don't get the surgery, you'll probably die. But if you do get the surgery, they'll probably also kill you on the operating table. So, which one do you do? And who decides? Because you're unconscious, you've got no say-so at this stage. Yeah. And so the medical power of attorney, there's a little privacy law out there that goes along with medical, and that's the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, better known as HIPAA, that says nobody, not your spouse, not your kids, nobody can look at your protected medical information without your written authorization.
Okay.
So number 3 would be a HIPAA authorization, a HIPAA release. Here's all the people that I want to be able to call the hospital and find out how I'm doing. Right? So like my kids are all legally adults at this stage. That doesn't necessarily make them super smart, responsible individuals. It's just by virtue of the law that they're now an adult, right?
Yeah.
So maybe I don't want them handling my business, or I may not even want them making a medical decision for me just yet, but I might still put them on the HIPAA release. That way they can at least find out how I'm doing, you know. And then number four, and this is a document that's going to have different names depending on where you are in the country, but you'll hear it referred to as a living will, an advance directive, a directive to physicians, all different names for basically the same thing, which is you putting into writing whether or not you want to be maintained on life support if all that life support is doing is prolonging the moment of your death.
Is literally life support, nothing else.
That's it, right? You're done.
Just keeping you alive.
Yeah, they're just keeping you alive. And so I will tell people all the time, you personally will never care whether or not you have a will, but whether or not you have a durable power of attorney, a medical power of attorney, a HIPAA release, and a living will, that is directly related to your care, comfort, physical maintenance, end of life. That stuff matters to you. I could honestly care who gets your stuff when you're dead, right? Who cares? But those four things, there's not a person walking around over the age of 18 in the United States that probably shouldn't have all four of those things in place right now. You just don't, because you don't get to pick when you become incapacitated.
No, absolutely.
You know, and unfortunately, the alternative to the powers of attorney is the court guardianship program. And that's where you've got to do something for somebody. You have no authority to do it. So you're going to a court, declaring them legally incompetent, having the court appoint you or potentially somebody else as their guardian who's now in control of everything. A terribly expensive process, terribly time consuming. And the court system is much like cockroaches in the sense that if you let them in your house, you cannot get them back out. You know, well,
I'm sorry, but that just the visual on that.
But you know, it really is a reality. You know, I'm in a relatively rural part of East Texas and Southwest Arkansas. And so, you know, our cost of living here compared to, say, Northern California, right? I mean, there's just night and day, right? Night and day. But even in rural East Texas or Southwest Arkansas, you can expect to spend several $1,000s doing a guardianship minimum.
Wow.
Compared to, you could possibly even, I mean, in many states, they have form powers of attorney that are available online for free. You know, you could go and type in Idaho durable power of attorney. And I don't know for sure, but I bet you can find what's called a statutory power of attorney. Statutory meaning created by the legislator, built into the statute. And it's fill in the blank. You fill in the blank, you would get it notarized or witnessed as required by state law, right? Super easy. And in many cases, you can avoid the necessity of ever having to do a guardianship if you've got those basic things. Not always, but in most cases you can. So yeah, you know, having some of those basic things. And again, it's all directly related to your health. You know, if you can't access funds, you can't buy food. And if you can't buy food, you don't eat. And if you can't make medical decisions, you're not getting the care you need. And if your life is being unreasonably prolonged for no good reason, and you're suffering on ventilators and things, that again, all of these things can be avoided with a little bit of, and that's very simple, super easy stuff.
Yeah. And it's the other thing that people don't understand as well is that what you may want may very well not be something that they would agree with.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
And you know, that takes your rights away if
That's
you
right.
don't have that written out.
Yeah,
No,
I've
I want,
on the
unplug it.
that's
Take the
right.
plug out of the wall.
Well, and on the end of life decisions, I've talked to lots of people that have, most everybody has said, "Oh yeah, just pull the plug." Don't, if
Yeah.
there's no point in keeping me around, don't keep me around. But I've had a few over the years where they'll have, well, everything except hydration. I don't want to die from dehydration. They just, maybe it was just some sort of fear that they had of that. I don't know,
Huh.
but it was their
They saw a
thing.
movie or something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
who knows what it was, but that was their thing. Um,
Uh-huh.
and then one story I've told a lot of times. My grandfather was he was a retired American Airlines pilot, and he was actually one of the very first ones. He was the
Wow.
first American Airlines pilot to fly from what eventually would become DFW in Dallas to Baja,
Uh-huh.
Mexico, um,
Wow.
and planes in the Smithsonian, the whole deal. And
Wow.
well, this was back, back in the old days, they had a good old fashioned American Airlines pension. You retire and
Oh
they just
yeah.
pay
Oh
you
yeah.
till you
That's
die,
why.
right?
Okay. I remember that. Yeah.
And of course, his pension was based on American Airlines stock from when the company started.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so you can imagine,
Yeah, that went up.
this,
Yeah.
yeah, this 92-year-old man making a whole lot of money every month on that deal. And at one point, I asked him, I said, "Hey, Papa, if you're at the point where the only way you're going to keep on living is on the machines, the only way, that's it. What do you
Mhm.
want? Let's put it in writing. That way, everybody knows there won't be any question about it." And he said,
Mhm.
"Look, John, when I die, and I mean the very second I take my last breath, that pension check stops coming." He said, "If it makes sense, y'all just leave me plugged in, take the money, and go have fun every month."
I love it.
Yeah.
Good for him.
And again, he was thinking about it, right? And
Uh-huh.
that's the thing,
Yeah.
people will say, "Well, yeah, pull the plug." But I mean, if you've been in a hospital room recently, there's a lot of plugs in there.
Yeah.
Which ones are you talking about? All of them? Any one of them? Are there certain ones?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you
Yeah.
you think
Yeah.
about these sort of things. Who do you trust to handle business? Who do you trust to make medical decisions? Who do you want to
Right.
know about your health care? And how do you want to die right there at the end? Maybe there's even
Uh-huh.
something special. I had a lady one time, and she wanted me to write in there that while she died, she wanted somebody to hold her hand and, if possible, read the children's book, The Velveteen Rabbit.
Oh wow.
And I
How
thought that was
neat.
pretty sweet.
Yeah.
So again, you can be creative. You can have a little fun with it if you want. And maybe imagine the memory that might give a family member of hers.
Yeah. Yes.
A sad time, and yet a cherished memory that they can hold on to for years to come. So,
Yeah.
who
Yeah.
knows? Who knows? But yeah, so yeah,
Yeah. Wow.
all of that related to not a will, right? I mean, none of that has anything to do with the will. Um,
Hmm.
and then, of course, the other part of that is along the same lines. Is when people start talking about wills or trusts or passing assets at death, they're assuming they're going to have anything. And I'll tell you, here's the little scenario that we see all the time. You have a health crisis. Maybe
Mm.
maybe it's a stroke, maybe it's a heart attack, maybe it's a fall, or maybe it's just
Yeah.
something that's gotten
Cancer.
it's gotten progressively worse, and now it's crossed some sort of line. And
Hmm.
often what you find is, let's just say it's a stroke, right? If you have a stroke, you're
Hmm.
going to go to the ER, then to the ICU, then you'll go from the ICU to an admission room, you'll go from the admission room to inpatient rehabilitation. If you're still not better, you might go to what they call skilled nursing rehab. That
Yes.
would be basically nursing home, but for rehab.
Right.
And all of that is generally going to be covered by Medicare,
Hmm.
supplemental insurance. But once you get to that skilled nursing rehabilitation, if you are still not better after pretty much a maximum of about 100 days, the
Hmm.
Medicare stops paying. They say, well, that's just
Hmm.
rent now. And so what's happened is your health crisis has now become a housing crisis. Where are you going
Mm,
to live? If you want to go back home, which most people would, but you can't get yourself off the couch into the bathroom and back, then how are you going to do that? How are you going to accomplish that
right.
goal? Do you need
Hmm.
assisted living? Do you need nursing
Hmm.
home care? And what's the
Yeah.
difference between all of these?
Hmm. Hmm.
And so your health crisis has become a housing crisis. And then the next thing you find out is how much this stuff costs.
Yeah.
You want to go home and you're going to need somebody to sit there with you at that house 24 hours
Oh
a day
God. Yeah.
at even in rural East Texas, you're talking $20 an hour
Yeah.
for that's
The basic.
$240
Just
a
the
day.
basic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Oh
just a
yeah.
sitter. That's
Yeah.
just not a nurse, not any sort of trained professional. That's just somebody to sit there with you, waiting for you to get
Hmm.
off the couch and go to the bathroom and back, right?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
And to
you
sub
know,
for them when they go and take a couple of days when they take their weekend or whatever. I mean,
uh,
there's a lot more than just one person
oh, absolutely. Yeah, because
involved
one
in all
person
that.
can't work
Yeah.
24 hours a day, 7 days a week, right?
Bingo.
Or
Yeah.
maybe you need assisted living, which, $4,000, $5,000 a
Oh,
month
at least.
at
Yeah.
least.
Yeah.
And
At
again, I'm
least. Probably
talking,
out here more. Yeah.
oh yeah, you looking, yeah, you start going into a big market, a San Francisco, a Boston, a New York, a Chicago. Yeah, it's just outrageous. And then you've got the nursing home, which would be the kind of your highest level of care. And again, based on market, probably the lowest price nationally is going to be somewhere in the $175 per day. You're already at $4,000 a month
Wow.
there. You start looking at a place, I think the last time I looked at Boston, their average daily cost was $350 a day.
Mm,
I bet
mm,
San Francisco's not similar or not any different than that. New York's going to be very high
mm-hmm.
like that.
Oh yeah.
And so what has happened now? Your health crisis became a housing crisis, which became a financial crisis. Bam, 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 possibly in just a
Yeah.
matter of a month or two. And what so many people have no idea how they're going to pay for that because they just never thought about it.
Mm-hmm.
It
Mm-hmm.
just never dawned on them that that's going to be their little experience. They
Yes.
think about, oh well, my dad, he worked at the shop and he retired, and then at 75 he had a heart attack and died while he was at the house. And so
He was lucky. He was
right.
lucky.
But here they are at 85, and they've got Alzheimer's or whatever the deal is, and it's a
Oh
whole
God.
nother
Yeah.
situation. And so on top of the powers of attorney, I would also encourage anybody to have a good idea of how you're going to pay for that care. Because
Mm-hmm.
generally speaking, there are only three options. You can be one of the very small percentage of people that have long-term care insurance.
Mm-hmm.
That's the
Mm-hmm.
kind of insurance that pays for that sort of thing. But last
Mm-hmm.
numbers I looked at, about 5% of the population has long-term care insurance. So that's a pretty tiny figure in comparison. The second option would be to pay cash.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that'll wipe you out fast.
Right. And so yeah, if you're one of the folks that's been blessed with a lot of resources and you have the ability to write
Right.
$10,000 a month checks indefinitely, hey, more power to you.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now, one thing I will mention is that if you were going to pay cash, one option
Mhm.
might be to get more cash.
Uh-huh.
And I'll use my wife's grandmother. She just passed away about 3 weeks ago, age of
Oh,
92.
sorry. Mm-hmm.
Um, but she's lived the last, I'll say, 5 or 10 years in assisted living.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when her husband died, she really couldn't keep up the house. So she had sold the house and moved into an apartment because she felt
Mm-hmm.
like that's all she could afford. Of course, the apartment is tiny. It's not built for a woman in her mid 80s. she's falling in the shower, she fell in the kitchen.
Yeah.
And I'm talking to her and I say, well, look, what about this assisted living place that right up the street? And she said, well, actually, I've looked at that and I have friends there and it's really nice and I would love to go there, but I get $2,200 a month. That's it. That's my Social Security, a little bit of pension from my deceased husband. That place is $3,500 a month. You know, I can't pay $3,500 a month on a $2,200 a month salary, you know?
Yeah.
And I said, but wait a second now, wasn't Papa Gene, he was a World War II veteran, wasn't he? Yeah. Well, if a veteran was on active duty for at least 90 days, and one of those 90 days was during a period of war, so World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Desert Storm to present, that's a wartime veteran. If a wartime veteran needs somebody else's help with their daily living, feeding them, bathing them, dressing them, and the cost of that care exceeds their ability to pay, the VA will kick in some extra money. And it's available to the surviving spouse of a wartime veteran.
Okay.
And so I'm explaining to Millie, hey, look, let's apply to the VA. We do.
Yeah.
We get $1,300 a month out of the VA. Well, that brings her $2,200 up to $3,500. And now she can afford the assisted living. And I bet we got an extra 5+ years with Millie that we wouldn't have gotten had she been in that dank little apartment.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, so again, and you know, we have a large veteran communities out there. You know, even with our, you know, now all of our baby boomers are up in years, and you know, that's at the very top of that are your Korea era, and then all the Vietnam.
And the Vietnam, yeah.
So that's one of those things that a lot of people would never even know about. They think, oh well, I did my time in the military, I got out, that's it. Nothing for me. Yeah. I didn't get shot. I didn't get blown up. You know, I just did my 4 years as a mechanic, never even left to Austin, Texas. You know, that was it. But it's there. You didn't have to go to war. You just had to be on active duty during a war period. So.
Wow. Okay.
And then the big one out there is Medicaid, or what, you know, you would call Medi-Cal.
Right.
You know, but it's still, it's regardless of the name, it's a federal program that is administered by the states. So the states changed the terms a little bit, but the big overall rules for Medicaid are created by the federal government. And so the big rules are going to be the same, whether it's California or Texas or New York or Massachusetts. The devil can be in the details. So for example, you can have a home in any state in the United States, you can have a home and qualify for Medicaid up to a certain equity limit. In Texas, which uses the minimum equity limit, that's
why does that not surprise me? Yeah.
Right. It's
sorry.
600.
I'm being nasty here.
Oh no. But even that, the minimum equity limit is $635,000.
Oh wow. Okay.
If you owned, I'm in Texarkana, Texas, as we're doing this right now. If you owned a $635,000 house in Texarkana, you would probably have one of the biggest 5 houses in town. Now, if I had a $635,000 house in Silicon Valley, well, it's a 1-room shack. Right?
No, it might actually be a 2-room shack.
Okay, it's a 2-room shack. Yeah. But that's why you'll see in places like, but in California and in New York, they have increased that equity limit, and I think it's well over $1 million.
Yeah.
So, you know, most people would think, oh, well, I have $1 million house, I can't qualify for Medicaid. But yeah, if you're in San Francisco, if you're in New York City, you can have that house and still qualify for Medicaid. Vehicle doesn't count. Certain farming and ranching operations don't count. And then also depending on state interests, like for example, Texas does not count IRAs.
Mm.
So, imagine a person that lives in Texas and they've got a $500,000 house and $750,000 in an IRA, and they drive a Ferrari. Well, that person qualifies for Medicaid because those three assets don't count.
Okay.
But
Okay.
but now let's imagine somebody else in Texarkana, Texas, that has a $50,000 house. They drive a 1985 Mercury Grand Marquis that's worth about $25, and they own a little rent house down the street. And the renters in that rent house pay $300 a month occasionally.
Uh-oh.
Okay,
Uh-oh.
so
Uh-huh.
this is a poor person, right? I mean,
Yeah.
they're poor. They don't qualify for Medicaid because the rent house is a countable asset.
Oh no.
So the guy in the mansion with the $1 million IRA and the Ferrari qualifies for Medicaid, but the person, this person that's broke over here and barely sustaining themselves on a couple of $300 a month rent checks doesn't qualify for Medicaid. And you can imagine how dangerous that is, because I bet if you grabbed that poor person off the street and you said, hey, what happens if you ever have a stroke and have to go to the nursing home? They would say, well, it's not going to matter. I'm support, I don't have anything to worry about.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, they're the one that has the problem. They just don't know it.
Wow.
The guy over here with the money, he's thinking, oh, well, if I ever need nursing home care, I'm just going to have to private pay for it because I have money.
Right.
And so you got two people, neither one of them are right. They're both wrong. But one of them is in a really dangerous spot, because what happens if that person has that stroke? They go to that nursing home, they run to the end of that 100 days on their Medicare, and now the nursing home says, okay, we need $200 or we're kicking you out.
Bye.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you say, well, I'll apply for Medicaid. Well, you can't. You have this rent house. Well, okay, well, I'll sell it. Well, who's going to buy a trashy rent house where renters pay $300 every once in a while? Maybe you get it sold. And even if you did, it could take 4 or 5 months. Well, at that rate, you're racking up a bill at the nursing home at $6,000 a month. Whatever you do sell it for is just going to end up going straight to the nursing home. So that's why I say I would really encourage people to know how you're going to pay for this, because it's either insurance, cash, or Medicaid. Right. That's it. Those are your three options. And you need to know which one you are, because if I had talked to that lady with that rent house, and maybe I talked to her at 65 when she's healthy, I would have said, hey, you know what? Look, you have a problem here. This rent house is going to be an issue. Maybe we should consider putting that rent house in a trust so that the value of it will not count towards your eligibility for Medicaid, and yet you can still benefit from the income that the rental property generates. And we could have solved that problem well in advance. And then she has a nurse, she has that event, she goes to the nursing home, she qualifies for Medicaid, the rent house is preserved, and maybe that money is now there to supplement her quality of life, and maybe she has a little something to leave behind to her family, and maybe that gives her some pleasure, whatever it is. But you've got to know in advance,
Right. Yeah. Well, that just comes back around to one of our original points, which was that you don't run out and start doing all this, right, with a will and or a trust or whatever, right, after you're already sick. You do that when you're up walking around. You can think, you can talk to the people who are important to you, and you can get it all set up beforehand.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it's, and it's one of those things where what's the old saying of what's the what's the best time to plant a tree? This 20 years ago.
Yep. Yep.
But what's the second best time to plant a tree? Today.
Right now. Yes.
Right now.
Yeah.
Right. Before something else happens,
Yeah.
And so, yeah, there's, I really do. I encourage people, look into this. I will say that one of the problems, because this is a relatively new field, we refer to it as elder law. And there's even there's a National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys. But if you look at, for example, if you look at the state of Texas, there are 120,000 licensed attorneys in the state of Texas. There are 200 members of the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys in the state of Texas.
Really? That's not much.
Little bitty tiny.
Yeah.
And you'll find that everywhere. You'll find that in California. You'll find that in Massachusetts. This is not it's not a big field. It's very complicated. It's very hard to learn. You have to have a passion for it. And they don't teach it in law schools, or at least historically they haven't. So there haven't been a lot of resources available for young attorneys to get into the market. So it is very difficult for people to get any sort of guidance on this. They'll end up doing one of a couple of things. One, they get on the internet and try to Google it. That's kind of like me. I woke up one morning and I had this just aching pain in my side, just buckled over. And so what did I do? I did like just everybody else, right? I immediately grabbed my phone and Google, left abdomen pain, right? And I'm scrolling and I finally found this, article, and it's for nurses, and it's on how to palpitate the abdomen. And it said that if you push and it hurts, that's one thing. If you push and let go real fast and that hurts, it's an appendicitis. And so I push, no pain. I push and let go real fast, and I buckle over in pain. So I grab my keys, I jump in the car, I drive straight to the ER, kick it in the front door, and I mean, I'm pulling my shirt up saying, cut it out. I got an appendicitis, cut it out. I didn't have an appendicitis. It's probably gas or something. I don't know. What I'm not is a nurse, right? I've got no medical knowledge whatsoever. I've got no business trying to figure that out on my own. Luckily, I was able to go to the hospital and have some real professionals tell me, dude, you're fine, quit overreacting, and don't believe everything you read on the internet.
Bingo.
Yeah. So I certainly do tell, check stuff out, read everything you can read. That's all fine and dandy. In the end, nothing is a substitute for somebody who lives and breathes this kind of stuff day in, day out. And one thing I will say that doctors have done better than lawyers, if you went to your family practice doctor and, he saw some mark on your skin that he was concerned about, he doesn't treat it. He probably didn't even diagnose it. He sent it over to a pathologist, another doctor, to do some tests on it. And then when that doctor does some tests on it and finds out it's cancerous, they sent you over to an oncologist. And the oncologist then comes up with a regime on how to treat the cancer. And maybe there's going to be some surgery. And so they're going to send you over to an anesthesiologist to knock you out. And then there's a surgeon that's going to cut it, right? You've got all these specialties where each doctor knows everything about their field, in and out.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
And they all get to charge for it. Yeah.
And they all get to charge a fortune for it. That's right. But, the oncologist doesn't try to treat he doesn't solve your brain surgery need, right?
No.
And the
Right.
anesthesiologist doesn't do a heart bypass. He might knock you out first, but somebody else is going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
In the legal field, we have not historically done a very good job of differentiating ourselves based on specialty.
Mm-hmm.
And so the other problem I have seen is, people do have these questions. What do I do when I get older? And in many cases, they've had no contact with a lawyer ever. And if they have, it's with the lawyer that did their divorce in 1989,
Mm-hmm.
or got their kid out of a DWI 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Right. And that's who they call. And it really is like calling your dentist to ask them about your heart palpitations. That's not the person. So I really would, and you could go to the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys website and you can look them up, and right there it says find a lawyer, and you can search by zip code and find somebody that specializes in this type of work. So there are some resources, and you ask these sort of questions, see where you're at. Ask what happens if I become disabled? How am I going to pay for my care? What are my goals as far as leaving my assets behind? What are the tax issues that I need to think about? What are the cost administration of doing all of that? And then you get the other issues, which is the people you leave behind. Because one of the big things that I see with the kids or whoever you're leaving your stuff to is people have a tendency to plan for what things are today.
Oh, right?
Yeah. Right. And so, I've got Ward and June Cleaver in the office, and they want to leave everything to Wally and the Beav, and Wally and the Beav are just fine. They're great kids. Oh, they get into a little tussle here and there, mostly just because that Eddie Haskell kid is getting them to do something.
Absolutely. That's right.
But for the most part, they're good kids, so we're going to leave everything to our two good kids. But that's what it is today, and not what it might be at the time of your death. Because and a lot of people don't remember this, but I think it was early 90s, maybe either late 80s or early 90s. They did a reboot of Leave It to Beaver. I think it was like one season.
Okay, with the same people playing the grown up.
It was a grown up beaver.
I kind of.
Yeah, it was a grown up beaver, except that now Beaver is divorced, remarried, has 3 stepkids. Right. Okay. This was not the Leave It to Beaver of old. It was the reality Beaver.
Yeah.
And so, these are the things you got to think about. Your child or beneficiary, they could predecease you. So you need to plan for the death of a beneficiary. Where do you want that share to go? Does it go to their kids? Does it go to their spouse? What? You decide, though. You figure that out. What happens if they're in a bad marriage? You don't want that inherited asset to get tied up in their divorce, or what if the child has become disabled? We think about things like nursing homes and stuff as being the older generation's problem. Well, we're all one car wreck away from it. And if your child is the one who's disabled, they're often going to be on Medicaid, SSI. That may be their health insurance, their housing, their food programs. The receipt of the inheritance, bam, they're disqualified. So you could actually do more damage by leaving an inheritance to a disabled person. Creditors, I've had kids that were they're behind on student loans. They have a judgment against them. They're behind on taxes. Maybe they had been sued and they have a judgment against them, whatever the deal is. And most people, if I'm talking to them, they don't want the assets that they're leaving behind going to their kids' creditors, going to their kids' former spouse.
Right.
right, all of these sort of things. So and the cool thing is you can plan against all of these sort of things.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
obviously going to be very personal to every person, and how you do it and what trade-offs there are and all of this sort of thing, but you want to be
Mm-hmm.
asking these questions. Don't just say, oh, I'm leaving everything to Wally and the Bee because they're two great kids. Sure, maybe they are today, maybe they're not tomorrow. And what happens if they're
Mm-hmm.
deceased or in a bad marriage, and ask those questions and let that professional guide you and say, yeah, there are some
Right.
things we can put in, we can fix
Mm-hmm.
that. And if you're
Yeah.
talking to somebody and they say, nah, you can't fix that, well, then you're talking to the wrong person, and go find you somebody else that does know the answers to those questions.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh no, absolutely. Absolutely. And it can be the opposite too. I mean, what your kid is like now may be totally different in 10 years. They may get their shit together.
Absolutely.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
And so there's the other piece of it is, assuming you haven't died or gotten, or run through all the money that you had or whatever. Um, you know, it's one of those things you need to revisit because things change. How much money you have change, how much, I mean, it's all, I just know, with my husband and I, that's, he has his kids. I don't have any kids. I mean, it just, there's things
Yeah, sure. Well,
in
and
there.
I tell people all the time, I say, you go to the doctor, annual checkup, right? They run the test, they take some blood,
Right.
maybe it's that one
Yep.
every 5 years where they make you run on the treadmill or something, right? But they go and do all of that, and at the end they say, oh, you're healthy, not a thing wrong with you, body of
Right.
an 18-year-old, right? Well, that
Uh-huh.
doesn't mean you're the same position a year from now or
That's
2
right.
years from now. And much like your health, at 40, you can probably get away with not doing that annual physical, and maybe hit it when you're 45, or push it to your 50, right? And you hit 50, maybe you can still get away with it from 55 or 60. But the difference between 40 and 50 is a lot different than 70 and 80. So, maybe between that 70 and 80, maybe we do need to start making it an annual visit, or
Yeah.
every other year or something. And
Yeah.
I'll tell my clients all the time, I'll say, look, you don't even have to necessarily come in and see me. Shoot
Yeah.
me an email. Just shoot me an
Yeah.
email that just says, hey, anything I need to think about. And I can look
Yeah.
back at your file. I can ask you a couple of quick little questions. Hey, anything big changed? You still like your
Right.
kids? You know, um,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
or I could
Yeah.
say, oh, well, by the way, look, there was this, you know, um,
This
I
change
know,
in the law or
yeah, there was this
something. Who
change in the
knows?
law,
Right.
and I noticed that you have this asset, and now this asset has this tax issue that's going to go along with it because of some law change.
Ah,
We need to
okay.
address that,
Right. Yeah.
and so yeah,
Yeah.
you can catch those sort of things.
Mm-hmm. Oh, for sure. For sure. And it's yeah, it's one of those things where even if it's just a yes or no thing that you send out to people. Has this changed? Has that changed? Has this changed? Right. And that's all it takes. And if
Yeah,
everything comes back saying no, 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 nothing's changed, great.
yeah,
We'll
off you
send it to
go.
you again in a couple of years.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. It doesn't have to be cumbersome. It doesn't have to be
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't have to be scary. And I will say the other thing, talking about health, they talk about one of the biggest things to maintaining health, particularly extending longevity and things like that, is stress management.
Mm-hmm.
As somebody who has sat there with literally thousands of people who have completed their estate planning,
Mm-hmm.
I can see it on their face. I can watch the stress fall.
Mm-hmm.
It's something they've been thinking about. They've had these questions. They've worried about it. You
Yeah.
know, they've had these, oh well, what happens if we, little Timmy's got XYZ problems, or
Yeah.
geez, my mom had Alzheimer's, what if I get Alzheimer's? She spent
Right.
every penny she ever had and ended up in a nursing home, and I don't want to do that. And
Right.
now that I've solved those problems for them, you see that piece of stress has left their body. It has
Hmm.
just
Hmm.
vanished. And that's gotta contribute to some health out there in some way, shape, or form.
Oh my God, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I agree. I agree. And and the other thing is it keeps a lot of families together because they're
Oh,
not all fighting over stuff.
absolutely. There are some families that are gonna fight no matter what. Um, and there's
Like
nothing you can.
I'm in one of those. Yeah.
Yeah, everybody's got them either directly or just adjacent. Um, you know, but you can also inadvertently create fights by
Yes.
pitting people against each other, or not
Hmm.
setting things up clearly. And you don't want to do that. You don't want to be the
Hmm.
cause of
Right.
their problems. I
Yep.
had a pretty nasty probate. I represented the children from a first
Mhm.
marriage. Another attorney
Uh,
represented the surviving spouse. Another attorney represented the business partner that was in business
oh.
with the deceased.
Eh.
All of the man's plans, as far as we could all tell, everything backfired. I mean, everything
Oh
went wrong.
no.
And the assets
Oh
that he
no.
thought were going to one person were going to somebody else.
Oh
And
no.
it just was a terrible. And then, of course, everybody's suspicions against each other. Everybody thought everybody else was out to get them.
Right.
It was
Right.
just it was a really bad situation. It took over a year to resolve the whole thing with the family.
Wow.
And when I say resolve, I don't mean happily.
No,
It
no,
was
no,
one,
no. Just
yeah,
it was just
just
yeah.
it was just
Yeah.
over.
Right. They
Finally,
could
it
move
was,
on.
you know,
Yeah.
and that had to have been close to 15 years ago. I ran into that client at Target or someplace
Hmm.
maybe a year ago,
Uh-huh.
and the first thing out of his mouth was talking about that case, right? So
Oh
the
God. Yeah.
the
Yeah.
the legacy his father left behind, that was it. It was a year of pain and suffering and
Yeah.
animosity and expense and awfulness. None of the
Yep.
good stuff.
Yep. Yep.
Going to the baseball game, that's gone. Those memories are gone, and they're replaced with this catastrophe,
Yep.
of bad
Yep.
planning. And again, you
It's
won't
amazing
care
what
about
money
that,
will do.
but if that is a concern for people out there, yeah,
Hmm.
I really can't imagine that anybody would want that to be the memory that their loved ones
Their
retain.
legacy. Yeah. Yeah. Oh no, absolutely. Yeah. It's amazing what money will do to people.
Oh, and the crazy thing is, it doesn't even have to be a lot. When
No.
you've watched two brothers beat each other up over the deer meat in their daddy's freezer, you know at that point that value is irrelevant.
Well, and on that note, I think we should probably wrap up.
So, but what a great spot to end it on. That's right.
Exactly. Exactly. No, that's perfect. That's perfect. So, yes, so thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah,
It's been it just confirmed everything that I already knew about all these things, having been through some of my own experiences with it. But yeah, it's something that all of you out there who are listening or watching, do something about it.
that's right. Get
It's
it
not,
done.
doesn't have to be expensive,
Nope.
just to get something in place and find out, just get an hour of somebody's time to let you
That's right.
know where you are. Um, and with that being said, I will say that that neither of us are doctors, obviously, and none of this is to be seen as medical advice, which is also true. It's health. It's for your health. So please do take advantage of anything you can around this. And with that, I would like to thank my guest. And I will say what I always say, which is I will see everybody next week.